Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and by RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome to MotorWeek podcast number 154 and MotorWeek on Facebook Live number 1.
Whoa!
So we're going to basically have a chance to do something a little bit different with our podcast today. Those of you watching us live on Facebook, you'll also have an opportunity to shoot us some questions because our topic today, and let me go around the table first. We have our writer-producer, or rather, we have our road test producer, Ben Davis.
Hello, guys.
Our assistant producer, Greg Carlos.
That is me.
We have our writer, Zarek.
Woo! Let's start over. Like rerun everything.
We got it. We're cool.
Say hello, Garrick.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Garrick Zirkin.
Zeiken.
You'd think, that I'd get that right after
Still
now.
the new guy, so it's okay.
The new guy.
True.
And Patrick Lucas, who's sort of in charge of all this stuff that we call social media.
I'll take the blame for all of this. Yeah.
Garrick, how many of these have you done, Garrick? Is this your second?
Podcast?
Yeah,
this would be the second.
This is the second one.
Yes.
But the reason Garrick is here today, besides the fact that we like him, is because, and he was also a warm body that was available, is the fact that we're going to be talking almost exclusively today about the North American International Auto Show. Right. And we'll basically go around the table, talk about everything we saw that we liked and didn't like. And at the end of it, we're going to touch on a couple of topics. We'll go through the winners of the North American Car, Truck, and Sport Utility Vehicle of the Year awards. And I think because it broke today, the day that we're actually recording this, we'll talk a little bit about Chrysler being accused of cheating on diesels. So with that said, let's get on to it. Garrick, you and I did most of the previews, and Greg, you were basically working a lot with our videographer, Dave Hunter. Mm-hmm. Let me just start going around the table and say, what vehicle did you like the best of all the stuff that you saw at the show?
Well, I think of the two that got the most attention, the Toyota Camry was the most well-attended press conference that I went to.
You said two, so what was the other?
The other one was the Volkswagen ID Buzz.
Okay.
There was a lot of interest.
There was a lot of
might you say buzz?
Well, I figured someone else would, so I'm going to hold off on that.
So he got it in there first. When
crash and burn.
I was kind of and I still am a little worried about the Detroit show, but then you look at what was there, mm-hmm. and you had not only the best-selling car in America getting totally redone, mm-hmm. but you also had the best-selling minivan, being the Honda Odyssey, getting redone.
Right.
And we had a bevy of products from German manufacturers, and a lot of it felt like Frankfurt West. The companies that kind of underwhelmed us were the domestics,
right.
And frankly, Chrysler did very little, and Ford not too much, and GM a little more. So it was a really kind of weird vibe to the show.
Actually, hearing you say that, and we've talked about it before, how the Camry, the sales are not what they were.
Well, but they're still best-selling cars.
Right, but I'm now seeing that the auto show kind of represented the market now. 10 years ago, the Camry and the new Camry and Pilot, we would have really been talking about those.
Oh, yeah.
But now the midsize sedan sales are falling. And I'm sorry, not the Pilot, but the Odyssey. I mean, when minivans were really big 10, 15 years ago, I mean, this would have been huge. And now nobody really cares anymore because everybody's buying the utilities, the sports utilities, which is
it says
why,
a lot.
Right, which is why I guess the North American Car of the Year now added that.
The Sport Utility Index, and we'll get to that in a minute.
But
go ahead and continue, though. What struck your fancy at the show?
My biggest thing was that Kia Stinger. That it had a lot of talk, and
sure.
I wasn't following the press conferences like you were. I was more behind the pack.
You were actually working.
Yeah. I was behind the pack, but I just kept hearing about it all day. When I finally got to see it, I was impressed. It's a nice-looking vehicle.
It's aggressive looking.
It does. It looks good. And then,
did you like the bling on it, the hood scoops and the vents? I mean, that was the only problem I had with it. But then again, it made it stand out.
Yeah, I mean, it's always weird when auto shows are, it's hard for me to see a car at an auto show and know what it's going to look like out on the street where it's going to be most of the time. So it didn't really bother me that much. But yeah, I did hear a lot of people saying that if they had something to gripe about it were those things.
Joe, have a Facebook Live question?
Yes, we have a question from Facebook
I
Live.
didn't know what he was doing back there.
Mark wants to know, was there any news on the 2018 Mustang? I know you guys said there wasn't a lot of domestic stuff, but
there was nothing
on that?
official except that there's going to be a hybrid Mustang. That was the only really thing that Ford said, and they didn't give a time frame on it.
And there were no concepts or anything, right?
From what? Mustangs?
About Mustang.
No, there was no
just
real
an
talk on the
announcement.
Mustang. There was no real concepts. The only thing that in the introduction for the F-150, there were comments made that there's going to be a hybrid F-150 and a hybrid version of the Mustang. A lot of that is, of course, to meet the CAFE standards, and even if they get relaxed, they're not going away. And also, the Mustang is sold around the world, and in a lot of other countries, that will actually play much better than it might actually play here. Okay, Benny?
My turn. Mm-hmm. I really love the concept VW bus as well. I just think it's awesome to see something like that, and I would love to see it hit the streets. The Atlas R I thought was kind of cool, and I'm really excited to hear Volkswagen's pushing so many electric vehicles down the road because I think they truly do the best job at it.
Yeah, they're talking about a couple of dozen electric vehicles, actually about 30 electric vehicles by 2025. I mean, they have used this opportunity of their of diesel debacle to redo the company. Now, the Buzz, which looks like a micro bus, it is a second-generation concept that they had shown before when they were talking about EVs. But for some reason, I think because this one was just more finished off.
Pretty colors.
Because, pretty colors. Plus, they said it's going to be all-wheel drive, and it will have a 278-mile range, 40 miles more than a Bolt EV. That it got much more attention to. What?
Two engines.
Two engines. It got a lot more play this time. But while we're talking about that, you mentioned the Atlas, which is their new Passat-based crossover, which was big. And then I think the surprise at the show was that they took the Tiguan, which has never done that well here because it's been so expensive, and they're going to do a long wheelbase U.S.-only version of it. They've added 10 inches to the wheelbase and a third row in that. So they're going to have 2 3-row SUVs when a lot of manufacturers are still struggling to do one.
One more ad. I'm pretty pumped about the confirmation for the Bronco 2020.
Yep, 2020. 2019.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah,
We've taken all your steam away.
Well, no, not at all. Yeah, let's go to
We did have a comment earlier about the Bronco. They wanted to know more info, but we got another one now, which is kind of odd. I wanted to stick out. Aubrey wants to know any news on any kind of hybrid technology in the commercial realm, transit vans, that kind of thing.
They didn't. There was really nothing there at that show, but that's not where that information is normally released. I can tell you that will coming up in March, the middle of March. There will be the big truck show, the work truck show out in Indianapolis, and there's a day set aside for green truck information. That's where that information will likely come. Having said that, Ford has made it clear that they want to do primarily hybrids, but if not hybrids and plug-in hybrids for their entire line. And since the powertrains between so many of the vehicles are similar, if they do a hybrid F-150, I'm sure it will make its way into the Transit. Transit Connect, not so sure, but certainly into the bigger Transit.
I wonder if Eddie Bauer is going to have a Bronco model, or if that's a little too dated.
You know, the new Bronco, first of all, we're the only one of the few countries in the world that hasn't had a Ranger in recent years. The Ranger overseas has been all new. It's a mid-sized truck about like the Colorado. Now it's getting redone again. We're going to get that vehicle. And, my guess is it'll be about Colorado size. It'll have an F-Series type front end on it. And then the question is, though, if they're building that in the same plant that they're going to build the Bronco, what will the Bronco look like? It can't be that long, so it's going to be shorter. How short can it be without messing up that assembly line? I'm wondering if we're not all going to be a little let down that this thing's going to look bigger and a lot more fancy than a lot of people out there. All the pictures are showing the original, compact Bronco, and this is not going to be it.
Well, hopefully, if it does end up being that, hopefully SVT will take it and make a Raptor type kind of Bronco or something to just scratch the itch of people that really want to see something like that.
The big headline in Detroit was, look out Wrangler. So we'll see.
That's awesome.
So look out Wrangler. Here comes some real competition.
So apparently they're planning on having the top come off, but I wonder if it's going to come off on all of them.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to have a hardtop version with like kind of those big wraparound windows that the Bronco 2 had.
Yeah.
If you don't want to deal with a top,
on it, you're kind of like the expert.
As well as have a hardtop.
B. Davis.
Remove a hardtop.
But I don't know about you, but there's no future vehicle I've been asked more about in the last 2 years than the Bronco.
I have one friend who consistently asks me about it, or claims that he's been claiming it's been coming out for the last 5 years. It finally was announced, and I got to tell him, I was like, it's finally happening. You were right, just before everybody.
2.3-liter EcoBoost with a manual for me, please.
That's probably, I don't know about the manual. Patrick.
You got another one. Gus wants to know.
He doesn't want to answer any questions. That's why
I've got something
this
to talk
Facebook
about.
Live is awesome.
Okay. Last one for a while.
Thank you all for letting us have your questions. Go ahead, Joe.
Gus wants to know your guys' thoughts moving on to the Audi Q8
I was literally just about to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Well,
stand by, Gus.
I'm going to say my comment and let Patrick have it.
Gus, you're blowing
Audi,
up my
let me
spot
explain
here.
what it is. Audi Q8, large concept crossover vehicle, shown for the first time at Detroit, part of the German onslaught in the Motor City. Go, Patrick.
All I was going to say about it was that it looks very interesting. It's still very much in concept form, but I'm just excited to see what they do with an interior, because they're always Audi's, as we have talked about, probably one of the best interiors still, and that one had a pretty fun. They showed a lot of interior shots of that concept, and it looked very futuristic, but still looked more production ready than a lot of concept interiors look.
And they're doing away with the control knob for the interface.
I did not notice that.
With what? What are they going to do?
It's going to be all touchpad.
If you look, do not like that.
Lexus?
Like touchpad like Lexus and touchscreen. Touchpad and touchscreen.
No.
In my opinion,
that
is I actually think they're taking a step back, but they're basically saying that everybody wants the same kind of interface they've got on their smartphone. So that nice compact that we like better than anybody else's, knob with 4 buttons.
Where are they getting
They
this
should
info?
talk to Acura. They finally brought back the volume knob on the stereos.
As did
Talk
Honda.
to them. I mean,
let's withhold judgment.
That's not what people don't want.
Before we get away, though, the Q8, Audi has a new designer. The grille is the new face of Audi, supposedly. I thought it was awful. But then that's just, it's all a matter of taste. But it's so bold and in your face that it's just. What's your opinion?
It's funny because
different generation.
Because the Q8 looks so radically different, and then alongside it were the new SQ5 and the new S5 Cabrio, and those look like they did absolutely nothing to it at all. So they're sort of playing this game where they're not going to change anything now. They're saving it all for this next.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming, though. I think you're right. They kept saying to us over and over again, this isn't more than a concept, Q8.
Well, while we're on the subject of grills, though, a highly contested subject was the new Lexus LS grill. It's got a lot of talk. Same basic shape, really.
Same
as
basic
we've seen.
Concept, but
right. Different take. I mean, I don't know about you. I liked it.
I hate the spindle grill. I liked it on that car.
Yeah, I'm sure it's popping up on the screen right now, but for those just listening, it's again, it's the same basic shape, but it's a lot more intricate, a lot of chrome in there, and it's basically like a cross hatch design.
It sort of looked like it almost wrapped into the bumper, too.
I certainly would not have to clean it.
Yeah, but how many Lexus owners are going to be out there on their hands and knees cleaning their Lexus?
It's the old Detroit thing. Longer, lower, wider, gorgeous car. I just thought it was a
new engine,
car.
twin turbo.
It didn't look far off from some of the true F car trims that I've seen, though, where that kind of mesh runs in through the bumper and stuff like that. It didn't seem like a far departure. Anyway.
Well, it wasn't, but somehow, I don't know, maybe it was the length of the hood. It just seemed to work.
Yeah,
or maybe we got used
honestly,
to it.
I think it was just the inlay because it's mainly a mesh inlay normally, but now it's got this crazy like dagger type crosshatch thing.
And the space between all of the areas is different as it flows back. So it's almost like looking at a picture in perspective.
It's got a lot of dimension.
But
This is the same chassis that the SC500 has, and it's you mentioned the twin turbo V6, all wheel and rear drive. A spectacular interior. I haven't thought that the LS lived up to its flagship status for years. This car, I thought, blew me away. I just thought it was gorgeous.
The interior is pretty interesting looking. Yeah. Definitely more high tech than we've seen than Lexus and Toyota really offered lately. Interesting knobs up on the gauge hood that shades it. I think the other big news is really a 10-speed automatic transmission. It seems like now at this auto show, 8 is the bare minimum basically for transmissions now.
The Honda Odyssey's got to be available with the 10-speed.
8, 9, and 10-speed transmissions.
Before we get away from it, we started off with Garrick talking about the Camry, and let's go back to it because this car was easily the edgiest, most dynamic-looking Camry they've ever shown. They showed us 2 models, the SEX and or XSE rather, and they showed us the hybrid. And the front ends were very different. The hybrid front end was a little more like an Avalon and more less in your face, but the body sculpturing on both was quite extreme. They didn't look like appliances. What did you think?
Well, I mean, looking at them, and in fact, they say that it's their most captivating midsize sedan. You're almost looking at a Lexus.
Very definitely. You have sort of that spindle look.
You're not just buying a car because it's safe and dependable. Now you're getting a lot more style than you necessarily would have gotten before. So they're aware of that. It's an inch lower. The wheelbase is 2 inches longer. So there's a lot of tweaking to make it more appealing. And I think what's interesting for them and really for all of the car companies is that you have the customers are wanting the crossovers. So they can't abandon these sedans, but yet they have to be aware that the customers want a crossover. So the sedans, they really have to step it up, and I think that they certainly did with this Camry.
What do you think about the two-tone roof option? They showed one model where the very top of the roof is black, and visually it really lowers the car. I mean, you step back and it makes it almost look like a sports sedan.
With paint, though?
Yeah. It's paint. And it has no character line. It's just paint, and you look at it and think, well, one wag said, where's the Landau top? But it was an interesting
It is, yes.
Interesting look.
I'd like to see that.
Interesting look. Some of the other vehicles, let's see that.
We got another question. Charles wants.
Oh, by the way, did I introduce you, Joe? Joe is our editor videographer who's sort of producing our Facebook Live for today, and he's handling the questions.
You're doing a great job.
Joe is one of our consummate people behind the scenes. Go ahead.
Charles wants to know about the Chevrolet Equinox. Now, I know there was a new GMC Terrain, but they didn't say anything about the Equinox, even though a new one is coming, right?
The Equinox is already out, and the Terrain is built on the same chassis, 4 and 6, and it will also get a diesel. Gets the same diesel that's in the Cruze. But if you remember, and I'm sure they do, the Terrain looked very different from the Equinox. This Terrain looks even more different from the Equinox, and it looks completely different on the interior. Same basic layout, but really they don't share anything much that's visual. Nice-looking vehicle. Looks richer than an Equinox. The big news at the show, of course, for Chevrolet was the new Traverse. And here's interesting. We've already had the GMC Acadia come out, and it got smaller to be more like Pilot size. The rumor all along is that chassis was going to have 2 wheelbases, a long one and a short one. GMC got the short one. Chevy gets the long one. They've actually added wheelbase, and the third row seat can now I can get in the third row seat of the Traverse and not feel completely cramped. It's not just for kids anymore. It looks tougher. They've raised the front end. It looks a little bit more Ford Explorer on the front end, and 6 and 4-cylinder power there.
They added trims. They have an RS and a now high country trim.
Yeah, they got a high country trim. So
again,
Chevy and GMC. they were all about crossovers, and that was it. There was nothing from Buick. There was nothing from Cadillac.
Yeah, another question about the GMC. Something about a push-button transmission I saw. One of the guys on Facebook wants to know, did you see that in person? There was talk of a push-button trans instead of a...
I don't even remember. I was actually at the reveal. I don't remember.
There was a rotary transmission.
The one, it's, you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember reading. I didn't see it because there's a ton of people around it, and I was doing other stuff. But, that is a different shifter. I don't know if it's a push button or if it's a dial.
I think it's a dial.
The one I'm thinking of is the Odyssey, and that's right in the middle.
You're talking about Terrain?
Yeah.
Terrain gets a rotary shifter, but the Equinox keeps a regular shifter, at least in the ones that I've seen, I think.
Another thing that the Terrain does, the Terrain looks way different than it did before. I honestly hated the way the old Terrain was.
Yeah, it's much more attractive.
It is.
It looks like an Acadia.
And they use that floating roof line that is now the new.
Oh, yes.
That's new throughout the industry. I guess Nissan started it with the Murano, and now it just seems like everybody's using it.
Evoque has used it. Yeah. Oh, yes. The rear, between the C and D pillars on the GMC Terrain, it actually looks like it's just sheet metal, unless you get a light color. So, yeah, that's a very striking difference.
I brought up some pictures of this Terrain that's got push-button stuff. You see it's like below the HVAC controls.
Yeah, but that's not the shifter. If you'll notice, the shifter is behind the cup holders, I think, and I think it's
there's
rotary.
the buttons. You see it.
Let's see. Is that it? That's it in the shift. It says radio. Where is it? That's HVAC. Oh, no, there it is. He's correct. On below the HVAC controls is a large park button on the left, a reverse, looks like a little thing you put your finger in, a neutral, a drive, which looks like a toggle. And yes, indeed.
I'll pass on that.
I will say at least the park button is huge. There's some that make it small. I mean, that's a button that you really need. And to make it big and obvious, that's a good. As much as I dislike that it's a button, if it's going to be a button, at least it's big.
I could get way off topic talking about a park button right now, but I won't. I'll save it for another podcast. But I had an issue with one recently.
Okay.
I want to hear that story.
So another push-button transmission. Punch it, as they used to say with the old Chryslers.
What else? I'm trying to think of other big ones. There was,
let's see,
concepts.
The concept, there were actually several interesting concepts. How about the V-Motion 2.0 at Nissan?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, that was one of the more striking ones.
Which was their attempt to say, hey, we think there's life in this Altima-like sedan market.
Sticking with the Nissan family, they went to Infiniti, the QX50, which should be pretty huge for them. And that's basically one that toes the line of a concept / production ready.
Yeah, it really was. Nissan also showed the Rogue Sport, which is the Qashqai and most of the rest of the world. So it's a shortened looking Rogue, although it's basically a different vehicle. And I
12
guess
inches shorter.
It's more along the lines when you say of what? It's NX, except small.
Q3 type deal.
Subaru.
I was going to say CX3. Is it that? It's not that small. Is it CX5?
I'd say it's about CX3 size.
Really?
I don't know. Now I'm starting to doubt. I think it's closer to like I don't think it's as small as a QX a CX3.
CX3, maybe not.
It's
probably more close to akin to the size of the original Rogue, but you can tell we obviously haven't looked into all the details.
Well, but I will say on that on our website we had a picture of the Rogue and that one, and
when the Rogue and the Rogue Sport next to each other.
Right, exactly. And you can see the difference. Yep. And you notice it mostly kind of in the back end is where they're losing. I
thought the Rogue
space.
Sport was pretty good looking, but
it's
definitely smaller.
Right, but they're gearing it toward urban drivers and young drivers.
It also may end up basically, the Jute is kind of like all long in the tooth, and they may get rid of the Juke and keep this in its place. That was one speculation, and it's bigger than the
Speaking of Nissan, we have a question Adam wants to know, and I think I know what the answer is going to be, but was there anything about the Z at the auto show?
No, not a word.
Yeah,
should be coming soon.
No, you would think so, but I've been waiting for it for a while, and it's it's almost like they're going out of their way to ignore it.
It'll be on that Q60 platform, most likely, with that new motor.
Please, more MotorWeek viewers, if you've got something you want to know about because I'm starting to run low on my list here. The Mercedes, they had a bunch like usual.
Sure. So that was the Crosstrek. Crosstrek. I thought the size of the Rogue Sport was a little larger than a Crosstrek, but in that
so
same
that's not
vein.
Terribly small.
No, in that vein. And Alfa Romeo didn't have anything new, but it was our first chance to see their new SUV, which I must say
that was LA.
It was spectacular.
It's a good-looking vehicle for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. BMW 5 Series. How can we
That
glance
was
over
big.
that? I
Yeah.
mean, that's huge, and it goes on sale like right away.
Did you guys like it in person? Because when I was posting all this stuff on social media, I saw a lot of just like ho-hum. Like,
Well, it doesn't
okay,
look
whatever.
any different.
Yeah, it's like,
very
is this-
evolutionary.
It's a little sleeker.
A little sleeker, a little more
Yes.
going on underneath, at the bottom in front of the wheels in the front.
Didn't look quite as hefty to me,
Yeah.
and but the big news for that is so not only is there going to be a plug-in hybrid version, but there's going to be for the first time an M550i, which is akin to the M235i, where it's not a full M car, but you still get a lot of that M.
Could get behind
A lot of those M attributes.
They
Joe's
also showed
waving
a
his hand like
760
crazy now.
with the first 7 Series with the M.
On the subject
treatment.
of BMW, we have Emily wants to know: will the Kia Stinger be able to compete with BMW, Audi, things in that field?
That depends on who you ask. Kia will say yes. That's the whole purpose for doing the car. But I guess it'll come down to folks like at this table and whoever else.
Did they say what engine is going to be in that Stinger?
Yeah, they got I think a 2-liter turbo and a 3.3 twin turbo V6.
Twin turbo V6.
I think
with the 4 cylinders 255 in the Stinger and the 6 cylinders 365. And if you're comparing it against the BMW, the M550i, that's 456 horsepower. So
Yeah, but this is just at launch.
I think they have a chance here. Their suspension's been stepping up a lot lately in the game recently, and if they launch it with an available manual, I think it'll have a lot of impact, and it'll be a cheap car with a manual that could be capable. I think there's a market for that.
I think there's a market
getting harder
for
to
it.
find a manual.
It's got to be
Think
better
about
than
it.
they had with the. I mean, I know it's Hyundai, but better than the Genesis's Coupe's manual.
But
That thing was terrible.
when you look at what Kia is doing, and they've stayed the course despite the fact that they've not always had successes with sales, they really have stepped up their game, and they've become the performance division of the Hyundai Kia operation. So I wouldn't count them out. I thought it was. I'll tell you one thing. As far as journalistic crowds, it had one of the biggest crowds around it the entire time the show was open. Yeah. That you could not get close to that car.
It had Brembos on it, the one I saw.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It had Brembos
Pretty
on.
impressive.
My question on, and this is just me personally.
Yes, Joe.
Put it through Facebook Live first.
How is it that Kia can afford to go make a rear-wheel drive sports sedan when, Ford and Buick and GM and Chrysler and stuff, they just all sit there and bellyache that, nobody will buy it, we can't afford to develop one, and that's why,
My
Lincoln
guess
is
is
just
part of that
rebadged
chassis
Fords.
is probably there's some Genesis in it somewhere. They're probably spreading it over between Genesis and them, and they'll find other uses for it.
And it might be H-Track, or not H-Track, what's the key alter? It might be an all-wheel drive maybe at some point, too.
Yeah, very
Which would
possibly.
be cool.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, we're just looking through here again.
Something very small.
Yeah, go ahead,
The
shoot.
first Chinese brand.
Oh,
ever at
GAC.
Detroit. Yeah.
GAC,
Gotta
and I'm
talk
not going to
about
try
this.
and pronounce what the G stands for because I can't.
City in China. I believe.
They made news not because they're at the Detroit show saying they're coming to America, but because they said they're going to open an engineering center in Michigan, which is usually a precursor of launching a vehicle. So we'll see. What did you think of their products? They were kind of
They
were okay.
Yeah, they were okay. I wouldn't say they were showstoppers, but it's always good to have somebody new there, and it was cool to go by the booth and see some people you'd never met before. And I mean, they look like
look
average
viable.
cars. Yes,
they look like average
they could
cars. They
work.
did have an all-electric model, a
Right.
GE3. I wonder
Yeah.
if GE knows they're using their name.
Right.
We didn't talk about Mercedes. Mercedes did two events. They did one the night before where they showed their freshened GLA lineup, a 250, and also the AMG 45. They look good. small cars are now a huge part of Mercedes sales worldwide, not just in this country. And then they had a very good-looking E-Class coupe that they showed at the show. I thought it was quite beautiful. And they had, celebrating AMG's 50th anniversary, they had 2 updates to the GT, a C coupe and an S coupe.
Yeah, fairly minor.
They'd already shown the C convertible. So, but they drew quite a bit of attention. The GLAs were, that's where they're putting their future money on. Interesting. Okay. Any more questions?
One last one.
Joe?
Somebody wants to know, what is the first car we're going to see on MotorWeek for a road test that was at Detroit? Which I know that's kind of a hard question.
5 Series.
Probably the 5 Series, and after that it'll probably be the Odyssey, I'd be willing to bet. But, because of when it's going to hit the market, 5 Series definitely, I think, because it's going to be out so soon. Okay, let's move on to a couple little things. The North American Car, Truck, and now Sport Utility Vehicles of the Year. I'm a member of the jury. I must say that I was not surprised that Car of the Year went to the Chevrolet Bolt EV, first reasonably affordable electric car with a over 200-mile range. I sort of also figured that even though in this new category of sport utility vehicle, even though it's not an SUV as we call it, or even a crossover, I thought since they put the Chrysler Pacifica in there and it's the first remake of the original American minivan in a long time, I thought it would win, and it did. I think if there was any surprise, it was pickup trucks. The contestants were Honda Ridgeline, which won, Ford F-250 Super Duty, and also the Nissan Titan, now that they have their full lineup out. And the order of finishing, by the way, was Ridgeline, which won by a handsome margin over the Super Duty, and they beat out Titan. I think a lot of people were surprised, but you have to remember that most of the journalists are car-oriented more than heavy truck. When the first Ridgeline came out, it got an awful lot of praise from the automotive press. This new one looks more like a regular truck, but it has a lot of features that most personal use buyers will use. So I think, it's a reasonable award, and I think Honda was very, very happy and gratified. So we'll see how it sells. The last thing, and this broke today before we actually started doing our pod and cast, but we should talk about it, is Fiat Chrysler America, and there was a rumor about this going around the show a couple days ago, has now been charged by the EPA that they basically are violating emissions rules and have done it knowingly on their 3-liter turbo diesel that's going into the Grand Cherokee and the Ram. So far, we're only talking about 100,000 vehicles. This is nothing like Volkswagen. Also, it remains to be seen whether this was poor programming or they had illegal defeat devices. It's interesting to note that the only reason this stuff is coming to the surface is because now all diesels are getting road testing, where before all the manufacturers had to meet laboratory tests. And as we all know, Volkswagen rigged their vehicles to pass in the laboratory, but they didn't pass on the road. Now, every diesel vehicle is getting extensive road testing for certification, and that's where this showed up. There's a lot of name-calling going back and forth. Chrysler's head Marcioni is basically saying he's going to fight it tooth and nail, so we'll see where this goes, but this is nothing like the magnitude that Volkswagen went through. And by the way, these engines do have urea injection, so they've got modern pollution systems on them. Probably won't be the last that we hear of someone being charged, but I don't know. With a new administration, who knows? Anybody got any comments? You saw the headlines.
I don't know.
Is it another peg in the coffin for diesels?
I'm surprised it actually took this long to find somebody else.
Yeah,
I kind of thought it would be like once the Volkswagen thing broke, I figured it would all be just like
you're going to get caught doing it.
Actually, that's interesting you say that, because there have been similar charges in Europe against, I believe, a couple of Mercedes engines and some other brands, and they sort of just drifted away.
That's what I thought. I remember the Blue Tech stuff, but I thought that just kind of went away.
Yeah. So maybe there's fire here. Maybe it's just smoke.
So, I mean, it's obviously, I know it's 100,000 vehicles. I mean, that's just all they've sold in the last, 2-3 years,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's
not like it's on select.
It's 14, 15, and 16.
Yeah, so.
But I actually thought they had sold more than that, but it's got to be all of them. They also haven't said that Volkswagens were spewing 40 times the legal limit in nitrous oxide. They have not put a number on this, so we don't know how badly they are polluting, but clearly, it's like, when is this? You wonder if diesels will ever, have much more than a toe hold.
One step forward, two steps back kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that brings us to an end to our MotorWeek podcast number 154 and our MotorWeek Facebook Live production number 1. I want to thank Joe Ligo, our videographer and editor, who's produced it today. Our audio engineer that always makes us sound terrific is Jim Bigwood. Our podcast creator, Bob Mixer. Our podcast creator, Patrick Lucas, all of us around the table. We want to thank you for listening and watching not only our MotorWeek podcast, but also our show every week on public television stations everywhere and also on V4 Velocity. Till next time, for all of us at MotorWeek, I'm John Davis. Don't pollute, drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and by RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.